Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the RIBA. My name is Stephen Hodder, and I'm president here at the RIBA. In a few moments, I'll be inviting Charles Jencks to introduce tonight's award winner and speaker, but I am, of course, absolutely delighted to add my own very warm welcome on behalf of the RIBA to today's lecturer and winner of the 2013 RIBA Jencks Award, the world-renowned architect Benedetta Tagliabue. We had the most wonderful conversation earlier this afternoon. As ever, the RIBA is hugely grateful to designer, author and broadcaster Charles Jencks for donating the funds to the RIBA to create this annual award. Through his work, his writing and his commitment to the benefits of great architecture and landscape, Charles Jencks has been an inspiration for many years. And as ever, Charles, I'd like to thank you all you do for the Institute in Architecture. Given to an individual or practice who has made a major contribution simultaneously to the theory and practice of architecture, the RIBA Jencks Award has premiated the work and talent of architects such as Cecil Belmont, Charles Correa, Peter Eisenman, Zaha Hadid, Stephen Hall and Rem Koolhaas, to name a few. This year's winner, Benedetta Tagliabue, is without a doubt a very deserving addition to this list, and I'm delighted to welcome her back to the RIBA. Benedetta has carved a global career in architecture, fusing practice and award-winning landscape and design projects with a passionate interest in theory and contemporary research. The winner of the RIBA Sterling Prize in 2005 for the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh, and of an RIBA International Award for the Spanish Pavilion at the 2010 Shanghai Expo, she received an RIBA International Fellowship in 2009 for her contribution to architecture, and has provided invaluable support to the Institute's awards programme by judging the President's Medal Student Awards in 2008 and the Sterling Prize in 2009. To say a few more words and present the award to Benedetta, I'm pleased to invite Charles Jencks to the stage. Thank you, Charles.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy tonight to give the award to Benedetta from Barcelona. Benedetta, will you come up on the stage? And I can hand you a plaque. I've handed her a check earlier. You'll have to. You'll have to tell the audience. You get more than just something to hang on your dentist's wall. Anyway, I'm very pleased that you've won the award this year. It's a great honor for us as well as yourself. Thank you.
I'm impressed.
I wanted to say a few words about the award in general and this year's winner. It was founded back in 2003, and Cecil Baumann won it. And it was to award the simultaneous contribution to theory and practice, which is very hard. If you think of it historically, the very rare architects can write well, write a history, theory, or polemic or manifesto, and produce great buildings at the same time. It's very rare that it happens that they get an opportunity to carry out both. But at the same time, it's quite apparent that great architects, and all architects for that matter, are inspired by theory broadly considered. That is, not just writing, not just words, not just ideas, but what Howard Gardner, the psychologist, sociologist, thinker, cognitive scientist, says defined as multiple intelligences. That is, the way our skills and thinking is part of our body and part of our whole life. In a broader sense, then, theory can be considered, as it's thought in cognitive science, one of the multiple intelligences we have and develop. And architects are empowered by having these things outside architecture, these kernels or acorns or seeds of inspiration, which they look after, which they nurse sometime like artists, and which inspire them. Discourses outside the profession or beyond the profession, or, and Peter Eisenman was one of the winners one year, within the profession of architecture per se, the language of architecture. So that's how broadly we're considering theory tonight, particularly because Benedetta has said she doesn't love writing, doesn't write a lot of theory. And I think her theories are multiple in her practice. It's in a way theory embodied, literally embodied in her practice. Her practice is very real. It's artisanal, or it's like the old architectural studio of the 19th century or the early 20th century, or very Barcelona. And in the 21st century, it's a rarity because of the professionalization or over-professionalization of the practice. So she is a rare bird, if I may call you a bird. And that's part of what she's getting the award for, because she's kept alive something, architectural thinking, the studio practice. I know it exists in the schools, you know, obviously, in many ways. But in practice, it's bloody hard to keep it alive, all of that. There's another thing I'll come to, but I want to say one or two personal things about her work. You know, Frank Gehry's built his famous house for himself in 1978, and it's changed his career. So Frank Gehry builds a house. And it was a Spanish architectural critic, Beatriz, who said, it's the house that built Frank. Very true. Architecture builds the person building the building. Interesting idea, that you build your character and you build something yourself when you're building. In a funny way, I think the Scottish Parliament, you probably know, or you well know the story, but it was, the firm won it, Erik, Marias and Benedetta won it in 1998, when she was 35. And Erik had built a lot of buildings, was building a lot of buildings, and for the Scottish, this was really strange to have, this Barcelona character win. And he won. He sort of stalked the site, as I understand it. He went up to Arthur's Seat, the volcano right in the center of the city. And he spent time looking at this and looking at the context of the city, but also nature. And he came down, I've heard this, it may be apocryphal, it may not be true, but she'll tell us. He came down with a branch from a bush, and he put it on the table, and he said, here's the design. He'd ripped it off Arthur's Seat, ripped it off the context. And Donald Dewar, who was the first minister then, and the jury, Kirsty Wark and others, were so amazed. They hadn't seen an architectural presentation saying, here's the design, which was a piece of a bush. And then he explained, why the building was growing out of the site and how it was related to the ground, the seat, the Arthur's Seat, the incredible volcano, this nature, and so on. And he went on like that. And interestingly, people don't point out, but I know because I've written on the building, 60% of it is underground. It's a landform. It's a really interesting relation to nature and culture. I mean, it's a mediating building. And he called it a gathering place, and of course, that became the cliche for the next 10 years about all Scottish politics, a gathering place. Anyway, in 2000, Erik died, very sudden, well, protractedly, but died. And also Donald Dewar died, I guess, soon after. And so the person who was really responsible for commissioning it, who told the Scottish people that this was their building and why, and Erik died, and major national crisis. And, Benedetta and her office, and Rimjim, the local office in Edinburgh, for the next 4 years, till it opened 2004, really worked on that and worked on it, and they produced something. And in a way, I think it built you, in a way, doing that. Benedetta. I mean, it's incredible. So from then, she's gone on, and for the next many years, 8, 9 years, she's been building on her own and transformed this practice, or not, she's kept it alive, and she's made it into something. And it's, her theory, if we call it this, as I'm arguing, it's an extension. It's the way she runs that practice, and it runs itself. All I can do is invite you to go there and see how her spirit, his spirit, and the spirit of this architectural studio, collaborative spirit, creates city building, which has time built into it, and which stitches together the past, the present, and the future. It's really what I've called in the award agglutinative, and I've used a violently boring word in order to underscore its additive compound, and it brings together things in a way that's unique. So, Benedetta, terrific. Benedetta Tagliabue.
So, thank you, Charles. Really, I'm very nervous today, I have to say. I have to say this morning I woke up at 5, which is very strange for me. And of course, this of giving a lecture and receiving a prize because of practice, but also theory, was making me think, my God, what is the theory? And then I know I can only explain what we are doing as explaining stories. No, in a way, it's a series of stories what we are doing in our office, and it's a story what I still live now, and the story probably started when I met Erik, and maybe when we found this house and we started to work in it, and we said, oh, this is a project that we will never show to anybody because it's not even designed. It's just something that we were discovering and we were doing little by little. And then we realized it was the most published project we ever had. But maybe this was really also teaching us. It was a way of making architecture without really thinking, by doing little gesture, and then we had the opportunity to apply it somehow in other buildings. Well, our house is really next to the Market Santa Caterina. When I explain what we have done for the neighborhood and the market, I always say that we have done only an egoistic act, because we wanted our market to be better, we wanted our neighborhood to be better, we wanted to live better, and in fact we did a really great effort. I think it's important to act in a piece of a city or a neighborhood when you are part of it. No, it's kind of different. You really feel responsible, and you really feel that you're doing something watched by everybody. So this was the situation. We were living in a place which was destroyed not so long ago, in the 30s, to make this kind of big avenue, you know, the modernization. The market is here, you see, in the middle of the housing. And now we had this half opening, and we were asked by the city to redesign this old building, and we were watching at the city before doing anything in order to understand what the place was asking, what we had to do, because we were not clear. I think this project was really a project which we didn't have in mind at all at the beginning. It was only a kind of accepting the situation, looking at the situation, making a lot of documents like this one. No? For example, saying, oh, it's incredible. When you go in the market, then finally you have a piece of sky. No? This was very, very incredible, because in the old city, you never see the sky. And also we were thinking maybe if we have to redesign the old city, it would be important to redesign it little by little, fragments which are touching the existing, destruction which are not total. And we were producing a lot of material, which was not totally theoretic, but which had a very simple theory behind, trying of making a small intervention, touching the old city, and transforming it little by little. So when Erik died, the situation was a little like this. No? I remember when he knew about his illness, we went and make a tour in this place, in the neighborhood, and we knew that this type of new destruction was going to be then a new construction, a new opening for letting this piece of city become alive, breathe again. So this was also for the market. We knew the market had to be the moving piece for the whole neighborhood. And we did also the same game, like maintain pieces, but try to make this breathe, come out of the perimeter, come into the city, arrive in a form of a big roof or colors, arrive into the city and influence it and make it present to everybody. It was, I'm sure, it was very much in relation to our house. We were also very aware about all the history of the place, that this was a monastery, that in this monastery, this was a Santa Caterina monastery. We also had a kind of a saint called Caterina living in our house, so maybe that's why our daughter was Caterina. And this was a very, very personal story, becoming a public building for everybody. And then at a certain moment, this story, which was a history that we could only design in retracing the old maps, started to become alive. No? By this excavation, the archaeology started to become present. And we had this incredible moment, which Erik was explaining a lot about past being present. And when you're working on an historical building, you are just working on the present, of the presence of the things on site. And so in this moment, Santa Caterina was really mixing, no? Mixing with the history, mixing with the new site, with the new construction material, and we had the feeling, I always had the feeling, that we were doing something like a continuation of the building which was already there, no? Of the series of buildings which were there, the monastery, the market, and then we were only trying to make a market which was breathing, which had a beautiful roof on top, a roof which will permit no pillars in the inside. And in order to do so, we had to employ big structures and fantastic artisans who at the time were still very, very present in Spain and were able to really build piece by piece this very complex structure of the beams and of the wooden beams, and then at the end also of the ceramic which was on top of the roof. The ceramic, it was kind of a game at the beginning. No? We were thinking, oh, let's put this fantastic color that you find when you go inside the market in the outside for the city. And then we started to believe it, and we started to make this big salad become true. And it's really salad and fruits and what you usually find in a smaller scale inside the market, which was then arriving on top of this roof. And this was done thanks to a fantastic artisan who is still really managing the ceramic skills and was able to bring this incredible color arriving into the city, being visible and announcing the new opening, which is now happening in the quarter of Santa Caterina. So now the building is, and the city is really starting to be alive. You need a time to have buildings really acting in the city. But I think now the piece of city is really changed. You know, this is the market which is working and where I buy nearly daily for fresh food. And around is the complexity of the city, where the housing and with the piazzas which are covering the archaeologies, which are still there, covered but visible, and visible in the middle of the people who is moving, going shopping for fresh food. And I always like to show these photographs. The surrounding here, the neighborhood, was a very dangerous one. But now, maybe with a big public space, with a good public space, you have the possibility to do a kind of a better place for new generations, where friendships and good feelings could arise. So this was the story which I think was so important for us, very, very important. This is a moment where we were under construction, and I had one of the many friends which were helping me after Erik's death, Bigas Luna, who was filming Santa Caterina and was making a small film, a small story about this building, which was not finished yet. So he was believing in it before it was totally finished. And I think we have to go fast, because I put too many things. I didn't know how to explain the theory, so I put nearly all the projects. So it's a normal lecture, as the usual one that I do. Our assistants here, they were making me a proposal for different lectures, and at the end I transform it in the same usual one. But in Barcelona, this was one of the buildings that Erik left only drawn. No, it was a sketch, and we had to build it, and it was for the gas company. I don't know, we tried to make a building which was mingling with the sky, which had this kind of scheme that we have never done before, which is really making the building disappear most of the time. So this is the gas people, and they are not very happy when they see that from the sky their building is totally invisible. But it's important for us that the main foyer of this high-rise building is in the heart of the building, and is a kind of a public opening. This was not very understood, you know, by the different presidents. Maybe the first one understood a little bit, but then the other ones, they were saying, oh, we have a very small foyer, we have to change the entrance. But the foyer is this, no? This is the public entry, it's a public street, everybody can go through your building, and this is really one of the most impressive things you can have, and also it's a kind of a fantastic idea about Barcelona being a civic city where public and private companies can live together. So this was one of the stories, and now the private company is very proud about their building, and they always put it into every publicity or every kind of announcement they make about their company. And this was also one of the projects we started with Erik, and it was he didn't see the end of it. But we were playing also in this park with piazzas and squares. Part of the piazzas here are really pavimentation of our own studio that we reproduced and made gigantic. Because we wanted this park to be a kind of a urban park where you have some piazzas where you arrive from the city. But then from these piazzas you start to find a kind of artificial nature in form of vases or big fountains or this kind of benches that we have designed during many years. Really, it was very difficult to arrive to this design of the bench. So the Diagonal Mar Park was a kind of artificial nature introduced into the artificial nature of a city. And this was a big campus we were designing. on top of a mountain in the north of Spain, Vigo. And here also it was very important to have this mingling the buildings together with the nature, and also to transform the nature. No? The transformation was mutual, was the building, but also the landscape was getting different in order to make the mountain be more friendly, be more open to people, so that everybody could go there and find a meeting place where all the sports or shopping centers will be here. So this was finished also more or less in 2005, 2006, and then we started to make things by ourselves. But it was so, let's say, so much in the same wave that it was as if it was only a continuation. No? This Hamburg project that we won in 2002 and that we are still building, it's in the harbor, and they are transforming the harbor in city. This could be, in my eyes or in my feeling, is a kind of a variation on the Diagonal Mar Park, but the difference is that here we are next to the water, and we are working with the natural, with the artificial nature in a different way, because we are already in the park. And these photographs I always show because during the project many Hamburg people were telling me, but you make a kind of a Barcelona model, but in Hamburg this will not work. But in fact, you see how many people is using the space, how many people is here in Hamburg, even if the climate is not so fantastic. So it means that by doing an action in the public space, you can change the habits a little bit. And this is what we would like to do. But in the same time, we always try to be very learning from the surroundings. This is still in Hamburg. I put it very quickly because we are flying quickly on top of things. And this was an extension that we had to do very recently on a music school that we had built with Erik. And so this time the director of the music school gave Miraglie Saal as a name to the music school and to the extension, which is an auditorium open for the city. But flying from Barcelona on top of Europe, then we arrive in Edinburgh. It's a long time. I don't speak about the Scottish Parliament, I have to say. Maybe it was such an intense project, such an important project, that after a while it's really relaxing to have it there by itself and to be used by the politicians, by the people. And I have to say it's very well used now. It's really in a fantastic condition. And when I see these photographs, I like it very much because behind you have this Arcadia on top of the hill, like a reminder of ruins of a classic world. And then you have this other landscape world appearing at the bottom of the hill. So what you were saying, Charles, about the story of the flowers, I think it's true, because Erik was like this. He was always saying, oh yes, this is a project, and nobody was understanding, by throwing some flowers on top of the table, or saying that that particular thing was a project in itself. But in this case, really, was about trying to make this place, which we knew was chosen by the client to become the place for the Scottish Parliament, be occupied by some leaves, by some natural things. And now when you see the result, I think more or less you can recognize that first gesture, which was extending some leaves or some flowers from Arthur's Seat into this landscape in front of the Queen's Palace and at the end of the Royal Mile. So this was maybe leaves or maybe boats next to the other, but mainly was about telling to the client that we didn't want to make an official building, and we didn't want to have a kind of a building like most of the parliament with a central debating chamber and then everything depending in a hierarchy to something like that. We were proposing more examples like this one, you know, like boats, reused boats, how to live inside a boat, and how this could become a fantastic architecture, a public architecture, where people could feel at home, could feel as if this is not a kind of a very official building, but more a kind of familiar building, making a space, making a new piazza, and offering an entry, like a very easy entry inside the building. So this was an effort, because in fact this is an official building. It's not at all a kind of place where you can enter without problems. Now they built a new extension because of security, which is the exactly opposite of the entry as it was designed. This was an entry in the shadow. The other that they made now is an entry in the light, so that people can be more controlled. But our effort was this, no? to make the building have this feeling of being very, very familiar, very easy, even a collage of many Scottish material. This was a kind of a person which was so important. Everybody is interpreting this. It was another of these Erik's ideas, say, oh, this is exactly the building. So everybody have to interpret. Many people was interpreting that this was mainly the facade, or this strange panels that we were putting in the facade, or these strange openings which were the windows of the offices of the MSPs. But I still don't know. Maybe it was also a kind of a reference of equilibrium, no? Of making an effort and showing that there is no effort. And it was beautiful to be there during the construction of the Scottish Parliament. It was very complicated, but also it was a very, very intense place. And sometimes I had the opportunity to have other photographers going there. I was never photographing because I was only fighting when I was going to Scotland. But when they were bringing me a photograph like this one, I was saying, oh, this is really great, you know? It's really incredible, this color and these reflections and this window, which is a kind of the first recognizable thing into this very big building, which is mainly an office building. No? A parliament is an office building. So having something recognizable, something which transformed this office in something very specific, like a series of window, which is a series of individuals representing the different voices of the parties, which then will be the parliament. This was very, very, very special and very important. And maybe after we had this window, things were easier also in the rest of the building. No? As if when you have a good idea, then you have the speech coming more fluid and better. And so I also remember when the structural engineer from OV Arup was coming to our summer house during the holidays, because there was no holiday for this project, discussing about how to make the structure, how to design it. And now this room is really looking like the boat that we were proposing at the very beginning, where the people is really staying very near to the politicians and have this possibility of really making part of the theater. Last time I was there, I was, this is the opening, but last time I was listening to the Prime Minister's questions, and I think it's a fantastic piece of theater and participation of the people into the political, theatrical life. And I really learned a lot in this building, about also how the ritual can be part of a building, and how to try to make the ritual a little less stiff. So now this is the main lobby, the place where the politicians meet. This is one of the first photos, so there is no so much life, but it's really incredible now how much life is going on and how people use it in a very, very normal way. So next year it will be 10 years that the Scottish Parliament is finished, and I hope there will be a kind of a celebration. Let's see, we will try to help organizing it, and let's see if we have a kind of a possibility to look back and to be a little happy about the big effort of having built the Scottish Parliament. So this is another project which was for me very important. It was one of these competitions that you do knowing that you will never win because it's too official. This was the Spanish Pavilion for Expo Shanghai, and we were proposing to use a material, mainly a material which was wicker, which is very, very Spanish, and it's kind of disappearing, but it's also very, very Chinese, and in China it's still very much part of their rural life. And because the motto of this expo was better city, better life, we were thinking maybe it's not bad to propose something from the outside from the countryside, from outside cities, become part of the future of the cities. So I thought this was something which was worthwhile for an expo. When we won the competition, we had the difficulty to know how to do it. We didn't know how to do it. I remember Makoto, who was the project director, when we did the competition, he said, but how will we do it? And I say, oh, well, first we win it. And then when you win it, you have to maintain, no? And we were looking at things like this fantastic miyake, and we were saying, oh, yes, the Spanish Pavilion has to be more or less like this miyake dress. And we were doing many other things in the office, like these cardboard models or other type of models, in order to understand how this skin should have been. And then we arrived to a kind of panel which was more or less like a complex geometry, which could then have a result like the miyake. And we started to see if we could then hang, and in which way, these strange panels into the structure, which was an iron structure of the facade. So we had many different tries. Our office is a very artisanal office. We're working with hands, and we do a lot of things really to try before the hands of the real people will construct really. And we were trying to see if the things would work by doing this kind of small models before, and then trying to be living in it. You know, this was a model which was very complex because we had to give the transparency, but we couldn't really use the panels in this scale, and we were doubting if this could really work. But you go on and you try in this experimental way. And also we were trying to include more. No? The different colors of wicker could make writing appear. And we wanted this building to become a kind of a big calligraphy. This is a friend, a Chinese friend, who was writing me beautiful phrases or beautiful symbols. Most of them I don't recognize, but then because we don't recognize them, we cut them in somehow and we put it on top of on the facade. And this was the facade that we were proposing for the different panels. So we could use dark wicker or light wicker in order to make this big drawing that then would go away. And this is the flow of people into the plan of this building, which since the beginning was a kind of a building which was born more on a model than on the plan. And then the construction was really fantastic, because we could see that not only Wicker was a knowledge that we were sharing with China. We didn't know at the time nothing about China. At the beginning we were even thinking maybe we will have to transport the structure, and then we realized how ridiculous we were. They are absolutely fantastic and very skillful, and also they have this hand capacity, hand skills, and also this habits of sleeping in the place, for example. And so we had this possibility of designing the structure in Spain and making it built in China with no difficulty, or designing the wicker panels in Spain. We actually sent some prototypes, and then there was no difficulty for the artisans who usually worked for the country tools to reproduce these pieces. And they were kind of very, very proud, you know, because they knew that these pieces now were not going in an anonymous countryside, but they would go in the Expo, which for China was incredibly important, and they will become material for a construction. So it was really joyful to see how artisans were reacting to what they were building. In the beginning they were saying, oh, what do you do with so many beds? But they were not beds, and when we put them, in fact, on top of the structure, a strange animal appeared, and it was fantastic, and in the same time it was absolutely scary. And we didn't know how Chinese people would react in front of this. But they are very curious, and in a way I am discovering that China is a real cosmopolitan place. They are very open to everything. I mean, they have so vast a territory, so far away history. So in a way they are accepting, and they were curious, and they were happy seeing this kind of strange thing appearing. And also they have this capacity of loving strangeness, no? Or speciality. So this was at the end a kind of happy result also for me. It was this going into an experiment without having the possibility to try before was a real very, very big stress. But maybe because I'm, how do you say, I'm not totally clear about what I do sometimes, and this is very useful, because then you can start adventures which sometimes can be very scary. But if you are not very conscious, this is possible, and sometimes it ends in a good way. Or I suppose that it ends in a good way if you put the good effort during the process. And this is what I try to believe, no? That if we make a good process, probably the result will be also good. Then in China, we had many other proposals. This was a very beautiful one. This small painter is one of the, together with another small painter, is Picasso and Sanda Chen. They met in Cannes, in Côte d'Azur, in the 60s. And Sanda Chen now is one of the most valid, most, how do you say, quoted painter in the world. And when they met, Pablo Picasso made this portrait of him, and we used this portrait to design this small museum done with different pavilions, which will have to be built in the place where Sanda Chen was born. So this was a special, beautiful project. In China, this is considered like nothing, because 3,000 square meters, I say, oh, it's so small. It's surprising that a well-known architect accepts a project of 3,000 square meters. But we never go about quantity or about size. We always go about the quality of the things, or really enjoy what we are doing. And this project is really making us enjoy very much. No? This is in Sichuan. So you see the day of the opening, you have these fantastic colors, and you have these fantastic celebrations. Also the nature is very, very special. But also the story of Zhanda Chen himself, who was running away from China in '49 and had 16 children around the world. Now this lady, she is the younger daughter of Zhanda Chen. She lives in Madrid. And when the delegation of the Zhejiang people, politicians, arrived in Madrid, we had the opportunity to put them together. No? And so I was feeling very strongly that we are now making a fantastic, another fantastic history. No? We are in a very special moment in history where China and the Western world are meeting again. And this is very special, no? And we are curious one towards the other. And this is for me the present moment where Chinese clients arrive and ask me to design things. And I don't know how we will do that, but I'm very, very grateful to have this opportunity to participate to this very, very different civilization, and to participate with them, to their curiosity and to this mingling of different capacities. This is a project for a university in Shanghai. It's Fudan University. The name of Fudan is fantastic. So the dean of Fudan wanted us to design these 3 urban blocks. They are not very high to be Shanghai, but to be very integrated with the city. And what I like very much of this project is that it's a university, but on the ground floor you have all the streets and courtyards and inside spaces connected. So it's very, very public on the ground floor and very private, becoming a university, also connected by bridges on a certain level. And inside these courtyards, we designed this type of roofs, which are kind of covering the intermediate spaces of the inside, but also the outside courtyards, so that this is becoming a kind of a public space, and this roof is determining the public space inside the building and also outside the building. So the client is never satisfied. He always wants something different, so we have to do thousands of renders, because this is also the way to communicate in China. No? We used to say, oh, we don't like renders. But then you have to accept, no, that this is something that you have to use. And recently we had to do a competition, which was in my own city. I'm originally from Milan, and I was asked to make a proposal together with the other 10 architects for the new campus in Bocconi, which is exactly the Fudan in Milan. They have also a course together. So I was in a way also like a spy, seeing how Bocconi is working in order to introduce it in our Fudan project. But mainly we were trying of understanding the space, the place. No, this is Milan. It's my own city, but so many things are happening in Milan. No? The site itself of Bocconi, or this different, fantastic architecture, or also the story of the Bocconi family. No, why they did a university. They were actually people selling beautiful dresses, and so this is something taken from the history of the Bocconi family itself. And then at a certain moment they enter into education. They wanted to give a place in the memory of one of the sons who died somehow. And this collage to me were so evident that I really thought this is the plan, no? And we really started to believe that this was a plan, and we had then the difficulty to transform that collage into a model, into an architecture which was not denying what we were trying to do with the collage. So we were going together with a collage and this kind of cardboard model, and the cardboard model also we had it next to us doing another project for Shenzhen, for a tower in Shenzhen. So we were mixing, the things and say, oh, this type of pergola also could arrive here and could be very special and could be another Milano gallery, a big gallery for the university. So we were little by little transforming this collage, this series of material into something more understandable that you can explain to the jury and that has a kind of a sense. And here I present this because it was also another great story. It was a beautiful opportunity. I don't know why it happened to me, but someone came in Barcelona looking for an architect because they wanted an architect to design a set for Merce Cunningham. So Merce Cunningham, I didn't even know if he was alive at the time. No? He was alive. He was nearly 90. He was still really enjoying watching at the dances, and you can see very well in this photograph that I love, no? The joy in his eyes. And they asked me to design in this very specific Cunningham or Cage way a set for not only for the dances, but also for the musician that this time had to be on stage together with the dancers. So this was supposed to be open on the 90th birthday of Cunningham, and we were thinking that the best present for him would be to have an object which would remind a piece of crystal, a piece of crystal rock. So the first time I went and presented in New York to Cunningham, he was very attentive. No? I bought this beautiful bowl, which is a plastic bowl in the MoMA, and maybe Cunningham didn't know very much what to think, but he was always telling me, "Okay, let's go on." And his assistant, Trevor Carson, was also coming to Barcelona and working with us. And we were developing very fast because we didn't have very much time, this kind of rock, piece of crystal rock, into an actual architecture which could be built and could host more than 10 musicians with their instruments and also a dancer. Here we are in London, once that Cunningham came to see one of his dances in the Barbican. And we were proposing him this structure, which we were saying this structure is not only for a musician, is also for a dancer, which could be at a certain moment on top of the structure. And he was really considering, and then he said, if you promise me that the structure will not move too much, and that is not dangerous, and the dancer will not be scared, then I will do that. You give me the size of the place, and I will put a dancer on a different level. This was coming because he was explaining, he was on a wheelchair, and he was explaining to me how difficult it was to be on different levels. So, when you're on a wheelchair, you're lower. So that's why I was putting someone on top, no? On a different level, which is always difficult in dance. And this was the reality, no? You always promise or say, fantastic, it will not move, it will be perfect, not dangerous. And then we were building in Spain, because it was the only way to control with someone that I knew such a big structure. It was an 8-ton structure. But this man, he is fantastic. He is my savior. He's my hero. He was the one who designed all the iron in the Igualada cemetery. And this time he was the one who was giving assurance. He was not afraid. A ton for him is nothing. But he was the manager, and I have to tell you, he was really scared. So on top of that, the structure had wheels, and it had to be moved 4 times during the play. So this was at the end what was happening. There was a lot of projection, something which was not considered to be Cunningham or Rauschenberg or the traditional thing at all. Of course, we received terrible critics. But I was, the New York Times was a disaster. But of course, it's not easy, no? It's not easy. People who love dance, then they maybe don't admit to have a big structure, or then they don't like to have the structure be fade away by projections. But I was very happy because Cunningham ended the show saying, I'm very happy tonight. I hope you have seen tonight something that you have never seen before. And so this was part of his philosophy of acceptance, and it was very important for me to be part of this fantastic adventure. Actually, it was the last play that he could bring, because he then died less than 1 year later. So here you see that we have a different experiment. We are in a place that you probably recognize. This is Rome. This is Bramante, Tempietto di San Pietro e Montorio. It's very strange, but this is property of the Spanish Academy. And the Spanish Academy invited us, together with a painter, to do an exhibition in the galleries that they have there. And they say, oh, you can do whatever we want. And then with the painter, we decided that we will do a kind of, each one of us, an interpretation of Rome without being very, very literal to Rome. And at this time, I had a fantastic architect working with me, Katerina, and she was really doing incredible work with collage. And together we had this idea of making a kind of an alive collage of Rome, so that Rome would transform, and also the Tempietto would transform, and would transform in something different, something more familiar, something that you can transport and you can put into a room. So like a transportable Rome, which becomes more familiar and transforms into a bench, into a little table, into something different. So this was this crazy exhibition, and at the same time my painter friend, he was painting Rome without having seen Rome in his life. So you see that you need a very good friend to be able to put his painting together with this great collage and not a protest. Also, we were reproducing my own house in this live collage. And I loved very much this idea of making the collage become livable, no? So that you really have a different space, the transformation of the space, by living the collage itself. And I think the best intervention was inside the Tempietto. I don't know why. Usually it's very, very prohibited to do anything into the Tempietto, but this time they told us, oh yes, you can do an intervention in the Tempietto. And so we reproduced the fantastic floor of the Bramante Tempietto into these cushions, and just by putting these pillows on the floor, the Tempietto was transforming into a hippie place. So this was really incredible. This was going on only for a couple of months, but I think it was a fantastic experience, which is documented only by this series of photographs. So I don't know, I don't control the time, but I go very fast. This was one of the competitions we did. We did a very big effort to also win the Italian Pavilion in the Milan Expo that we will have in 2015. I think it was a good idea. No? It was an idea about this cupolas, and it's a double cupola, and there were many different cupolas which would be built by collective architects and making a fantastic variation on Buckminster Fuller's idea. And we got the second prize. But now we are still talking with the Expo in Milan to maintain at least this idea of collaborating with a collective of young architects reproducing different cupolas, which then will go in other places in Italy or in the world. So that really, you see here, these are the different cupolas. And let's see if Expo Milan is open enough to accept this kind of proposal. But I think this proposal makes me happy. No? I think architecture is now changing, and these people who have accepted a kind of crisis in architecture before the real crisis now are very up to date. So some of the collective young architects who are building by themselves in a very low cost way, they are very, very contemporary, and they are very explaining us something very valuable. So here it was a competition in Ferrara. We won this competition for a church, and with a good artist this time. He's called Enzo Cucchi, and that's why he's telling me, I will do my part and you do your part. So this is the way of collaborating, and it would be very good. And here we were. Ferrara is a beautiful place, as you know, but here we were trying to make something very light, a very light structure and very colored, because in this time when we were doing the competition, there were a lot of earthquake. The Ferrara, which is not an earthquake place, was moving, and a lot of buildings were falling down. So we say, why we have to repeat the traditional architecture? We do a very light one. We do a very light roof, and on top it's really fantastic. It's really making this idea of meeting in a light place under a light roof. So we were designing this. We actually forgot to put a real cross, and I was sure we will never win. But maybe the cross is in the roof, and so at the end we won. At the end we won, and we are in the process of having the new client of the church. And this is another project which we are doing now in Barcelona. It's a new Maggie Center outside the UK. And when I went on site, I found a drawing on a board, and I thought, oh, this is fantastic. This drawing was done by someone else. And I said, oh, this is fantastic. We can put some trees outside, and here we have our Maggie Center. So we really started to do something like that, and we are in a fantastic environment. We are in the São Paulo Hospital, which is one of the most beautiful modernistic architecture, with this excess of flowers, of ceramics, of decoration. And we were mixing this São Paulo ceramic with the real nature, and we are now designing a Maggie Center, which is a mix with gardens and courtyards and vegetations and different inside and outside. So I hope we will see this Maggie Center soon. And now I think this is the last project that I'm showing, because it's also a new project. No? We are opening the Erik Miralles Foundation. We started all of these projects with Erik next to us as an author or as a defensor. But now I think we have to separate and look back. And we opened this foundation with Oriol Boigas, Moshe Mostafavi, who was supporting, and of course Rafael Moneo and Elias Torres. And it's a very small place underneath our office. And I would like this to be not only a way to reminding Erik, but also to work together with young architects or groups in the idea of experimenting, which was very much something that Erik loved very much. So we started with this exhibition, which was a remake of a Harvard exhibition of '93. And in 2 days' time, we will have the second exhibition happening, which is Erik Miralles and the Time. So it will be about the ephemeral architecture, or how time was influencing Erik in his way of doing things, and maybe also is influencing us in our way of going on and reinterpreting things. So this is the images of the first opening. If you want to come the day after tomorrow, there will be the second opening, and you're all invited. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Benedetta. That was enjoyable. Race over, as you said, in the sky quickly through your projects. There are many questions I have and many observations before we open to questions from the floor, but I'll keep to a small time because we don't have a great deal of time. You and I discussed one aspect of architectural representation before tonight, and you showed a lot of it. You showed your collages, your wonderful investigation through the camera and through movement, and I want to ask you about that for a moment and just focus on that part of theory as practice, because my feeling is that architects lack means of communicating complex ideas, spatial ideas from the inside out, focusing down as the eye and the mind do on a detail, the meaning of something, the ambience. Very hard. You know, architectural photography objectifies things. And that is like women are objectified in photographs, right? You know, one point of view, the Renaissance perspective, formulated the way architecture was taught, theorized, experienced, and loved. And since space-time and architecture in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, we have tried to wrestle with this. But frankly, I profoundly feel that architects haven't developed techniques to communicate the complexity of their spaces, their light, the changing of moods, the meaning, and all of that. And so I look on your work, as I look on the work of David Hockney, as fundamental in teaching us how to convey the complexity. And I feel that David Hockney, what he's shown in his great photographs of the 70s and 80s, he stopped doing this, I think. But he did develop maybe 20 or 30 amazing portraits, both of people and places, where he uses the camera rather like a pointillist painter, but also as a pixelated photographer. And he has a commitment to the whole, the totality of his image, but he also has a commitment to the parts, as he describes it, you know, cubism, walking around seeing the face or the head from all points of view, and the building the same. And zooming in and zooming out. So this is partly a plea about architects and how they communicate and think about their work. But I think, you know, what I saw, especially in your collage of Rome, Tempietto, that you were creating with collage, and I feel maybe you are. So my question is, are you using it as a creative tool? Because you didn't even show one person at a computer. And you didn't show one, I know you can't get too close. I know you do. I know you do use a computer, but you know, you showed us models and collages. You showed us representational techniques about thinking about architecture, which are different from any other architect alive. And I think somehow that is part of your contribution. Will you just respond to all that?
Well, the Hockney technique, actually, we met with Erik in New York, and at the time I was living very next to the Met, and in the Met we had a very big exhibition about Hockney, and I remember we went together and visit, and there was this wonderful portrait of his mother done in this way, no? Where you also have this feeling that while he was photographing, he was also getting near to someone who he loved very much. No, the feeling was there. Yeah. So afterwards, we started. Erik was always saying, "Let's do a Hockney," and we were starting to make these photographs in collage. And it was for sure there was a theory underneath, and it was a theory about having many point of views, or exactly as you were saying, no, trying to get the architecture is so many things. No, you cannot describe it in one way. You don't have one photograph, and sometimes when you make one photograph is a lie. So it was trying to be more honest, let's say. Right. I don't know.
But it allows you to deal with this compound, of difference. That's what I think is different from most other architects, or even indeed all architects. Superficially, one might associate it with the deconstructivist period of architecture, and architectural fragments, or picturesque, or a whole lot of other things. But actually, it's a way of your making an additive whole, if I may put it. Venturi said the obligation towards the difficult whole. You have an obligation to the whole building, but you also have an obligation to all the parts. And that's why I'm interested in, this is a technique of thinking.
I think it's a technique also of being less afraid, Yeah. When you start a project, you always say, oh my God, now I have to do something new. You cannot repeat the same thing. No? You always have to do something very special. So in a way, sometimes making collage is also something, a way to start to have something more or less objective, no? Because it comes from the place, or for something which has something to do, and then from there it's easier to transform. So I think sometimes we have this, but also we have many people in the office, no? And many fantastic people. I used to love very much the people with the talent, with an artistic talent. More than people who are very good on computers. So.
Good. Well, thank you. Okay, let's have. Do we have a wandering mic somewhere? Yes, there and there. So a few minutes now for some questions or observations. Will Hunter is down in the front here.
I was really interested in you saying about the move to the computer, that you now in China is kind of expected that you do the rendering. Maybe you could just say a bit about that, how you've made the transition in the office from something artisanal to computer. Because the book I'm doing on the moment on Peter Salter, who is also a draftsman, that bit has been quite difficult.
Yeah.
The specifics of the curve lose their kind of, when it goes to the computer, it's completely different. I just wonder if you could say something about that.
No, this is true. No, in a way, I'm ignorant about computer, and we always try to make the computer reproduce things that we usually do with models, with something which comes more from the hand or from hand drawings. But now this renders, they're also part of accepting a kind of the opposite of what a collage is. No? A collage is openness and a possibility that you give to the building at the end. And in the render, sometimes you have this kind of fixing an image that sometimes it's a lie. I don't know. I don't like it, but maybe little by little also I will find something in it.
Do you do it in the office, or do you get someone else to do
We do it in the office. They are never very, very beautiful, so we try to make someone else with fantastic machines making them. Then they come back and we say, oh, they're horrible, and we change them. So it's all like a ping pong.
Back.
My name's Claire Richards. I'm an architect. I have a particular interest in cities and communities, and I love Barcelona. I love the Santa Catarina market, but also how your various interventions in Barcelona seem to have helped create a very successful and very fluid set of connections through the city. And in a little way, I suppose, a bit like Gaudi did. But I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the effect of that, because perhaps over here we don't quite believe that architectural interventions can, in that way, affect the way that people use the city and bring people together.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a way, I think Barcelona is a kind of an example of transformation of a city, and how the transformation of the physical, architectural, urbanistic part made the city be used in a different way. Now, I'm not sure if this is totally positive. In a way, it became such a beloved city that it's so full of tourists. It's really, maybe under the economic point of view is fantastic, but under the use of the city, it's at the limit of its possibility. But this is because by this transformation, I think, on idea of transforming by letting a very continuous city, you know, where you go to the sea without crossing very many places with cars, or it's a very beautiful sequence of public spaces, so that people started to love it. I remember many years ago, before going to Barcelona, some friends of mine who were art critics, they were saying, oh, Barcelona, it's a disgusting city. It doesn't even have a museum. It's true. But now it's offering a different beauty, a different way of using the city. And it's a familiar city and easy city.
I might say, if some people don't know it, was the only non-architect to win the RIBA gold medal, I think 1999 or year 2000. It won that because the mayor of Barcelona and the transformation of the city and architectural role in that. It's had an enormous influence around the world, Barcelona.
I was here.
You were here at that, right?
Yes, I came with the delegation.
Okay, right. Further questions? One in the center.
What's your favourite image from your presentation and why?
What's my favorite?
What's your favourite image from your presentation and why?
I don't know. I have many favorite ones. One of the favorite, for example, of the Spanish Pavilion is that one where you see the Spanish Pavilion from the side, and it's not totally finished, and it looks like an animal. This is something that I really love very much. I always put it.
May I say that having been involved with the Scottish Parliament, one of the things about it which is so convincing, which you don't see unless you get into the Parliament chamber itself, is the incredible way the design of that space and the light and the convivial feeling, the collegial feeling engendered is completely the opposite of the House of Parliament here, which is, the old left and right opposite debating and kind of Etonian bun-throwing culture of you're either for me or against me, as George Bush used to say. It's really interesting what as a form of democracy, this shape, which is, it's the shape of kind of a boat. The boat theme in the building is really exciting. I mean, the metaphor of the boat, upside down boats and fishes, of course, the fish boats. You come through the place for the media. You walk up into the semi-public space where politicians are interviewed by the TV and the press, and you walk up these stairs, and it's really a wonderful walk in through, of course, people grabbing you and trying to lobby and scream at you, and then you walk into this space, and the roof falls down on you, comes down with these, muscles and tendons. And a lot of politics is extremely stereotyped and boring. And, so these people are falling over like, and then they look up, and there's so much architecture to see that they get interested again in democracy. Oh. And I think of all the democratic spaces I know, it is the most moving in that way. It's a very friendly space. It's very dynamic. It reminds you of the old Parliament, which is just up the hill, 1600s, which had hammer beam roofs, which made an architecture of the roof, because the roof ceiling, is one of the few places where you got freedom if you're an architect. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'm fascinated by that series of mixed metaphors in that building. Not only the skating minister, not only the fish, not only the piece of nature thrown on the table. It really keeps your mind and eyes moving. In fact, you could almost say there's too much there, couldn't you?
Maybe. I don't know. But I like it, because the question you did, which one is your favorite image? Yeah. I usually choose images because I love them. No? And when I go into the Scottish Parliament, I feel happy, because I like all this quantity of things happening into the eyes. But I have to say something, because you made me remind something. This morning, I took the plane, and my neighbor, we started to have a little chat, and he told me that he was Scottish and Catalan. So I told him, we designed the Scottish Parliament. I said, I know your story, and he gave me his hand. And then he talked a lot about the Scottish Parliament, and he said, you gave the body to an idea of Parliament, which is marvelous. I say, it's the most democratic idea who has ever existed into an English-speaking country. He said that. So I wrote it on my... I also wrote his name, but I will not tell you.
Well, I think that's very true. I actually think it's profoundly true that, Margaret Thatcher famously said Britain was the mother of all democracies. And others... Anyway, let's not get onto that subject. I think there's time for another observation or question. Here's one.
Yeah, your work seems quite process and very, very playful, and I'm just kind of wondering at what point, or even do you guys find it hard to stop playing and start to define, I guess, a perimeter or a boundary or even a building or a structure from all these sort of ideas, or do you always constantly, even when you start to make it real, let it bleed in?
In a way, this is not a problem, because there's always someone telling you about stopping. In this profession, you always have deadlines, budget, all sorts of difficulties, which are kind of putting a limit to everything. So I have to say, I try until the very end, and Erik was even more, no? But he was really making the client becoming crazy. But at a certain moment, if you don't want to lose your project or your client, you need to stop playing a little bit.
Right. Well, I like that as a place to summarize your theory. I know I've rather tortured Benedetta with theory and this obligation to explain her theory. But if you go to her office and you see how it works, there is a mood, there's a culture of creation in architecture, which is rare. To have so many people working in this atmosphere to produce something always on the edge and of your mind and taking risks, and something that's very urban and very much to do with time across the past and all times. It's, I think it is a form of theory as being, and the being that you have created in your office, because it's very much a mood. And Benedetta, it's a great theory. Thank you.